How did you do all that? I mean, you've talked about the music, but how did you put this together?
Well, it's something that I'm pretty used to doing, first of all. I mean, I've been contracting musicians, contracting a lot of these particular musicians for the last decade. So it's the actual process is a very easy one. I have a list of people that I contact.
So you have a business in the sense that you do something on a regular basis. You know what the franchise is, so to speak, and you find what you need to be able to do what you have to do.
Yeah, there's a list of people that I draw from.
Okay, now
yeah.
What's the process that can apply not only from the podium to what you're doing now, but into everyday life and leadership and governance at the community level and so forth?
Well, I mean, if you break it down to its simplest level, really, it comes down to vision. I guess that's the first thing that I think about. And really, I or someone has a particular idea and they want to make it, they want to realize it, they want to make it a reality. So they have the vision, they see this as a possibility, and then they take the steps to do it. And in this case, I mean, if we're talking about the broadest sense here, I mean, I talked to Colin.
Colin Funk, who's with us tonight.
Colin Funk, okay, absolutely. So he's the big cheese. So I went to him and I approached him and said, this is something that I'd like to pursue, and is this something that you're interested in doing? And on the most basic level, that's how it started.
Now, here's 2 questions, and I'm going to seed the crowd with some questions here. Now, this is mean, it's cruel, but it won't hurt a bit, right? Could you take everything that you know and what you do here and run the country? See, I told you. Listen, does anybody want to be Prime Minister? Raise your hand, please. See what I mean? Who wants to be the conductor? You think it's easy? Ask these people. Do you want to be the conductor? Oh, are you the one? So I'm serious about that.
I have a hard enough time running Bow Valley Chorus, and my wife will vouch for that.
But you see what I mean in terms of transferable skills? Because John said at the outset that there was the military model, that there was a hierarchy, to the point where you're standing on a podium.
Certainly.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, you notice in our institutions, whether you're going to court, anybody going to court lately? No, just for business things. Okay. You notice the judge is elevated higher? There's a whole hierarchy. That's just kind of the way we're built, huh? And that's what I want to get at, in a way, is what you do here. You obviously have very well-trained, excellent performers that you've already decided are going to be appropriate for what you do. So could you transfer into your community? Let's say, would you like to be the mayor of Banff? Or could you do that? I mean, in terms of transferring these skills that you've learned here in conducting right into the community at a different number of levels?
Yeah,
in other words,
absolutely.
If you were the conductor, could you be indeed just about anything you chose to be?
I think that the skill set that's required to be a conductor, I think, is applicable in a tremendous amount of other pastimes or things that you could do. So clearly, I think someone who has this type of responsibility is capable of doing those things. I don't think that everyone that does it would want to, and I certainly don't. But I believe that the capabilities are there, clearly.
Now, second question, and I want you to think about, we're going to go to the floor in a few moments and get into a conversation for the rest of our evening here. Who trained you?
Well, that's an interesting question, because in terms of training as a conductor,
yes,
I actually, for the most part, have taught myself how to conduct, and I'm sure that the orchestra is all grinning and nodding their head because they've gone through the transformation.
Yes, they are all grinning and nodding.
Many of them I conducted back in 1999 or 2000, whatever it was that we. I know Tom and Eva were in the Millennium Orchestra, and I'm sure Bonnie was, and I'm not sure who else, but so I kind of taught myself. However, because I'm principally a classical guitarist, most of my clear and intensive training came as a classical guitarist. So my instructor for guitar was Manuel Barueco, who I must say, I have to say that because Manuel is probably the greatest guitarist of his generation, and so I'm very proud to say that I'm one of his students. So I had an excellent guitar teacher at the Manhattan School of Music where I did my Master's of Music. However, When I was a student at Manhattan School, I also studied conducting, and I also studied it at Wilfrid Laurier as an undergraduate. So I always had an interest in conducting, even though I was a guitarist. And I always had an interest in conducting, especially choral music. And so I conducted choral groups throughout all of my student tenure, if you will.
So with that idea in mind, what are the questions that you would like to speak to right now that we could, for the next 15 minutes, that we could put to John, or for that matter, just throw it out on the floor? Would anybody like to start?
One of the things that we kind of in business, when we have new leadership, I'm wondering how an orchestra reacts to a new conductor, or for somebody that has more than one directorship, how they kind of maintain that respect, I guess, amongst the orchestra.
Yeah, anyone
That's
can
a good
feel
question.
that here.
Yeah. How about if I put it to you guys? Do you respect this kid?
Well, they do today because I'm paying them.
But the question's a good one, is in succession, when the new guy comes in, what happens?
I think probably one of the Calgary Philharmonic players can probably answer that.
Okay, I'll just come over here to the cellist, and who will speak in a somber way. And
Tom McGee?
I've been in the Calgary Philharmonic since 1990, and we're on our third music director since
Bernardi
then. Mario Bernardi was the first, and when John, when you were talking about Toscanini and Ferd Goulart, I was just thinking, my God, we've gone exactly through that. Bernardi was a Toscanini, then Hans Graf came and he was the Furtwängler. And I always knew that whoever followed Hans Graf in our orchestra would have a very, very difficult time.
Anybody up there in the, I can't see you, there you are. Anybody have a question up there?
Something that has always come to mind when comparing the leadership of an orchestra to the leadership of a corporation or a government, is that in the orchestra you get to rehearse, and it seems that the conductor's work is more in the rehearsal and listening and making sure each musician, each group of musicians plays well at that time, meeting his standards that he comes with, what he thinks the piece should sound like, and then he comes out and does the performance. So how would that compare to a government or a corporation?
Well, first off, the question's a good one, because you often think government is making it up as they go along, in terms of where's the script and where's the score. Let's go to John first and find out. What
I will say the overwhelming majority of the work that happens with an orchestra and a conductor is in the rehearsal, clearly. And so when you have a concert and you see the conductor come up and he does the concert, essentially what that performance is a reminder of the previous work that's happened. And the conductor at that point is reinforcing, hopefully, what he has talked about in the rehearsal process, so now it comes to fruition in a concert. So really, you do get a lot of help when you do the final product. I mean, the rehearsal process is paramount, and I honestly prefer to watch a conductor in a rehearsal than in a concert.
I was just wondering, in rehearsal, is that at all a collaborative process?
That's a very good question. I personally, when I'm completely on top of everything, I don't particularly like the collaborative process. However, if let's say, for example, I'm not completely sure, this happened in our rehearsal today. I asked Eva about a tempo for the last movement. And the reason why I asked her about that is because I know what I want to hear, but I'm not sure if what I hear in my head is actually playable in the orchestra. And that's also compounded by my nature as a musician. I tend to play things faster sometimes than other people do. I like tempos that are a little bit faster sometimes. And so I asked Eva, and I said, what do you think is manageable in this last movement? And what determines it is the technical requirements in the first violin, because they're doing a lot of turns. which are bum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum. So they're playing 2 or 3 notes at a time. And in order to do that correctly and at a good skill level, there has to be a certain tempo that allows that to happen. So in that particular example, I called upon her and essentially the orchestra to pipe in as to what do you think is doable. And that has to do with the circumstances, because the orchestra got together at 6 o'clock today and we hadn't rehearsed this piece essentially at all until then. So we had very, very limited rehearsal time. And so because of that, the process changes a little bit, and I can't really completely dictate everything because I'm not sure if we can do all the things that I want the orchestra to do in the time frame that's allowed. So we have to pick and choose and sometimes pick our spots. And in this case, yes, it definitely can be a collaborative process, and I do draw upon it from time to time. But if I'm completely convinced of a particular interpretation or of how I think a piece should go, then I'm sorry, but I have to be Toscanini at that point. Then there's no choice in the matter. It's because it's on me, right? I'm the music director. It's essentially everything that happens here is my fault, whether it's good or bad. When you are in charge of something, you have to be responsible for it, and you are responsible for it, whether it's good or bad.
So the buck stops where you are.
Absolutely. And so the ultimate answer is it shouldn't necessarily be a collective process, and it can on occasion, but still, I'm responsible.